Slater, Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Happy Thursday, best day of the week. We are going to do some you know what? I don't know if we are. I was gonna say we're gonna do some sciencey and medicine talk later, but I'm kind of burned out for the week. We do have a virology professor tomorrow, though, during our special, the Columbia University virology professors. We are gonna do that, but I got some other stuff that we need to talk about today to kind of set the stage. I wanna talk about materialism for a minute. Why? It came up yesterday. I mean, we talked a lot about supply lines and how they're maximum efficient. We've designed them to be as efficient as possible, but the flip side of that is they're also very fragile. In particular, we talked about one business. It's the largest company in America that makes surgical masks, Prestige Ameritech. And after 2009, the H1N1 flu, they bought a bunch of machines, like multi-million-dollar machines to build a bunch more, to make a bunch more masks. But then after that, they almost went out of business because their masks were a little bit more expensive than the masks that were made in China. And we quoted this North Carolina State professor. She said, we need to be willing to pay a little more during times of peace so that we have supply available during crisis. Now, the problem is, this is true not just with surgical masks, it's true with everything. The problem is we don't do that. We don't pay a little more for things. I don't. I'll go to Home Depot and there's 2 hammers and I get the cheaper one. And the reason why is we all worship at the altar of materialism. We all do. And we all need to do better. Myself at the front of the line. It's the definition of materialism. Materialism is a tendency to consider material possessions as more important than spiritual values. That's the definition of materialism. A tendency to consider material possessions more important than spiritual values. We live in a materialist culture that tells you you must buy the latest everything to keep up, otherwise you're falling behind. We could do examples for hours and hours. You know it's true. Let's just do phones. That's the simplest example. The iPhone 5 is entirely sufficient for everything you would ever need a smartphone to do. Well, you could stop. We could just stop at the iPhone 5 forever, and it would be amazing, and we'd be fine. So I have the 6S. It's great, and but we got it all paid off. My wife has one, and I got the 6S, and they're paid off. So the iPhone 11 came out. So we were thinking about maybe like switching over to AT&T, and then we get free iPhone 11s. But it's like free, or it's not really free because you're stuck in this contract forever. But I was gonna pull the trigger. I spent an hour on the phone with AT&T, and I was like talking with Verizon and AT&T just to figure out how we get free 11s. And then finally I was like, what am I even doing? Like, this phone is perfectly fine. Why am I gonna spend $1,000 times 2 stuck in a contract? Like, ridiculous. But it took me an hour to step out of it. Now, you may be saying, like, the business side of me, and maybe you were saying, oh, Slater, like, it's really important that you buy the new one because we need economic growth, right? That's become the great virtue of America, is growth, right? We gotta always grow. We need to grow the economy. You have to buy more and more, and the economy needs to grow more and more. That's materialism. Now, how does this relate to China? So we live in this materialist culture that says you need to buy all the things as opposed to a few really good high quality things. We need a massive cultural shift in this country. It can't just be a behavior change of buy America, right? We can't just all say, hey everyone, let's buy America. Okay, let's do it. Like, it's not gonna work. That'll last for a couple weeks and then we'll be over it. You can't white knuckle this. You can't white knuckle change the spending habits in America. It won't last. It's got to be a cultural heart change. And the cultural heart change is buy fewer things, but buy higher quality. Same thing with an addiction, right? You can't white knuckle and try really, really hard not to have another drink. If you're white knuckling it, you will have another drink. You have to have a true heart change about it. And it's same with our materialism in America. We need a heart change. I want to give you an example of this in a second here, but let me go way back. So I found this article the other day, and I was reading it. It was from 1987, and I was reading it, and I was like, this seems like it's a lot older than 1987. This was written in 1887. George Frederick Parsons, 1887, he was writing an article about the dangers of materialism. in 1887. He was decrying the materialism of 1887. Could you imagine how his head would explode if he came here today? Good night. He was particularly worried about the church. He said, wealth seduces and neutralizes the church. It's a pretty scathing rebuke of the church in 1887. Just imagine if he saw it today again. But anyway, I want to quote this one, and there's so much here. Maybe we'll do more of this next week, but I think this is a good starting point. He said, to succeed in life is to get rich. That is the all but universal understanding of the term success. And you know that's true, right? Oh, that person's really successful. Why? Oh, they have a lot of money. That's the standard, right? No one says, oh, that person's really successful. Why? Oh, man, look at, he's just got his life in order. Like he has his virtues, his values are in line. His kids are amazing kids, right? It's not that, it's he's got a lot of money. That's success. To this, the lives of most of us are deliberately devoted. And if we succeed, it matters nothing to our generation what soils and stains we have contracted on the way. How base and mean, and narrow our practices have made us. How densely ignorant we may be of everything worth knowing. How dead our hearts may be to generous emotions. But in the end, we're rich. How precious should this gift of riches be when we consider the extent of the degradation to which the pursuit of it subjects us? Candor and truth, justice and equity, self-respect and faithfulness, all the qualities which go to make honorable manhood, in short, must be sunk out of sight, done violence to, or perhaps even surrender altogether in order to attain the desired end of being rich. It goes on, it's a long thing. You get the idea. 1887. What do we do with that? We talked a couple weeks ago, I think we did, about Arthur Brooks, and he teaches a course now at Harvard University about happiness. And one of the equations, he has 3 different equations. One of the equations that he's come up with or put together is satisfaction, so contentment. Satisfaction equals what you have divided by what you want. All right, so your life satisfaction, your contentment is what you have divided by what you want. Now, we always try to increase the numerator, the what you have, right? We think we need to be, we're not satisfied enough, so we need to get more stuff, right? That's what culture has told us. That's what Madison Avenue has told us for decades. You got to buy more stuff in order to be happy. And he says, no, the secret here is to decrease the denominator, lower the denominator, the what you want. Decrease your wants and you'll feel more satisfied in life. The iPhone example is a perfect example. My satisfaction equals what I have. I have the iPhone 6s. I need the 11. If I get the 11, I'll be more happy. No. Decrease your wants. Right? So if I tell myself, hey, you know what? I want the iPhone 5. And then I look, oh, look, I got the iPhone 6s. Wow, great. This is amazing. I feel great. Don't increase your numerator, decrease your denominator. You'll be more satisfied. But we want more, and we don't have enough money to buy more, so we settle for cheaper. That's where China comes in. We want as much as possible, so to do that, we buy cheap crap. And those are things made in China. Let me give you an example. So a friend of mine showed me this months ago, totally randomly, for no reason at all. I guess it turned out to be this reason. There's this YouTube page called Rescue and Restore. This guy's got 1 million subscribers on YouTube. And he takes old toys from like the 20s all the way to maybe the 60s. And they're all, I think we got a video of one, or this is the beginning. So this one's all, it's a dump truck. It's all rusted and beat up. Look at that thing. I think that's from the 50s, that dump truck. Beyond all recognition, right? And then in a 10-minute YouTube video, which is like hypnotic, this is the end result. Beginning and end. Look at that thing. Look at that toy. Awesome. Awesome. That toy, when that thing was made, it still exists today. But look how beautiful that thing can become. My kids have, I'm not exaggerating, 8 dump trucks. 8 dump trucks. not 8 toys. They have 8 plastic total pieces of junk, probably infected with WUHAN from China, dump trucks that we bought over the years. They're all broken. They're all smashed to pieces. They're total garbage. But for whatever reason, we just keep buying dump trucks. They're piled up in the backyard, just dump truck after dump truck after dump truck. Ridiculous. As opposed to buying one amazing dump truck, like that one made of metal, instead, right? Metal and rubber tires, like just one awesome dump truck that our kids could keep for years, and it would be their toy, right? That's not a thing anymore, where a kid has a toy, like this is their toy. They need all the toys, tons of toys, just constant barrage of toys nonstop. Just a couple weeks ago, our kids were acting crazy. They were just totally out of control. So we got rid of all the toys, all of them. We got rid of them. Partly out of like, all right, we're getting rid of everything. Like it was partly, and also partly like, hey, this is like, they're just like going crazy. They're having like seizures of overexcitement. There's just too much going on here. So we literally got rid of everything. We emptied out their entire toy box upstairs. We emptied out the toy drawer downstairs. We got rid of everything in the backyard. The fact that we have toy boxes and drawers should be a sign, right? And we put them all, it's right there. They're right there. There's a giant pile of toys right there. Didn't even notice them. They don't even know they're gone. We each gave them one. Jack got a truck or a toy car, and Grace has a doll. That's it. They haven't blinked. They haven't noticed they were gone. They haven't asked for them. Haven't thought about them once. We inundate our kids with crap, and they don't even want it. But we do the same thing for ourselves. We inundate ourselves with crap, from China mostly. We don't need it. We need a heart change, a shift back to quality over quantity. That's my pitch for Made in America. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. I want to talk about this real quick. I want to talk about these contact tracing apps that we've been talking about for weeks, and I'm starting to hear more people talk about as we're getting closer to it actually being a thing. So I told you it would start off voluntary, and then not enough people would sign up for it in order for it to work properly, so they'll make it mandatory. That was my thought, and then here we are. Singapore. Now, it's important to know, Singapore, a more collectivist culture, like a more pretty compliant, trustworthy culture, Singapore, they have an app called Trace Together. So if someone gets COVID, it monitors everywhere you go and who you're near, and then if someone gets COVID, it tells everyone that they've been near so that they can isolate, and then we can stop the spread. Right? So that's the idea. So there's 5.7 million people in Singapore. By the way, keep that in mind when people use Singapore as the shining example for what we need to do in America, right? Everyone's like, oh, we gotta be more like Singapore. Singapore has the population of Massachusetts. All right? Like Singapore and America are very, very different countries. Anyway, 5.7 million people. So you need 75% of people to sign up for this app in order for it to work at all. So that's about 4.2 million people. We'll call it 4 million people. They need 4 million people to sign up for this app, and they have 1 million. They're not even close. So it won't work. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't mean anything until you get to 4 million. And they have 1 million, only have 1 million. So Apple and Google, they're ready to release their version, their app, in May. And the question is, how many Americans are going to sign up for this thing? Not 75%. I could guarantee you that. What are the chances that 75% of Americans sign up for this app? 0 chance. No way are you going to get 75%. You're going to get at least 20% of people who are not going to sign up because they think this thing's no big deal and like, why would I, this whole thing's stupid anyway. At least 20% are going to be concerned about privacy. At least 20%. Worried about privacy issues and the government tracking me and all that stuff. And then 20% of people are just going to be lazy or can't figure it out and they're not going to do it. So At best, you'll get 40%. I think you'll get like 15% of people signing up for this thing. So this tracing app stuff, it's not happening. And that's a good example about like balancing everything. Like everything's a balance. Like what needs to be done versus what can be done. And maybe we need a tracing app in order to stop it, but it's just not happening. So you got to operate based off reality, not off of your ideals or the ideal. Right? So anyway, something to keep in mind as that happens. It'll be in May, so it'll be in a couple weeks. Apple and Google will release it. 15%, that's my prediction, 15% of people. All right, friendly reminder here, changing gears. Friendly reminder to not let pictures sway you. So we've been talking a lot about headlines recently, not swaying your opinion before you actually read the article. There's tons of this we've been doing lately where you'll read a headline about HCQ or something, about how it doesn't work. And then you read the article, and the article is like, okay, but then you read the study, and the study says the exact opposite of the headline. It's like, guys, so you can't let headlines sway you at all. And it's pretty advanced Zen news reading to not let a headline sway you in any way. It's really, really hard to do that because the point of the headline is to sway you. So you can't let it. It's hard to do. Pictures are the same thing, right? Pictures are very difficult too. But we've been more aware of that for longer. For pictures, right? So hopefully we're better at not letting pictures sway us. You know, there's the expression, a picture's worth 1,000 words. Like, yeah, I guess, but it also takes another 1,000,000 words to debunk whatever deceit is in that picture, right? So be very careful with pictures. Our rule on the Mike Slater Show is every picture you see, first, you have to assume it's fake. And then the second assumption is it's out of context. Fake and out of context. You cannot make any opinion or judgment of a picture until you determine first whether or not it's real, and then what the context of it is. And again, it's hard to do that. We see a picture, we just run with it. Can't. Got to stop, pause. Is it real? What's the context? Every picture I see, I assume it's fake or I assume it's out of context. I'll give you a couple examples real quick. There's this picture going around of a guy with a giant banner, and it says Trump, Pence, and there he is. That guy right there. Right? It's going around. So that guy, that picture right there is at a protest to open up the economy again in Michigan. It was taken this last weekend. All right, so this last weekend in Michigan, at a, I guess, more conservative-leaning open up the economy protest. And it's spreading around and how it's horrible, our Trump supporters, blah, blah, blah. Here's the thing. That picture is actually from March 2nd at a Bernie Sanders rally in Idaho. So every single part of it is wrong. And that guy, apparently he shows up at rallies all the time. He describes himself as a stunt activist. So he's just some loser who goes around causing trouble, right? But people will take it and run with it and create any story they want and then manipulate you in the process. So again, you look at that picture, and you could be manipulated by it very easily, or you could say, oh, that's fake, and or totally out of context, and then not be manipulated by it, learn the truth, and then just brush it aside. This picture right here of this flyer going around as well. Can you see the part in the middle? It says, there's a protest coming up, no mask needed, bring your children. If you're sick, still come, it's your right. Now, some say that flyer was put up by conservatives. Oh, look how awful conservatives are. Some say that flyer was put up by a progressive who wanted to make conservatives look bad. This is a fake. And some people say it's a conservative who put it up pretending to be a progressive who's wanting to make conservatives look bad, which would then make progressives look right. Like no one knows what that was, but it doesn't matter because no one showed up. Not a single person actually showed up to that protest that was planned. So, whatever. Here's the ultimate example. You're gonna see a ton of this week, especially because it's gonna be really nice this weekend. At least in San Diego, it's gonna be 85 and sunny today and this weekend. So good luck keeping the beaches closed. But Jacksonville opened up their beaches the other day, and there's a picture going around of a packed beach, and people are outraged. There's that packed beach. People are outraged that many people would go out there, and you see stuff like really dramatic, like blood on their hands kind of type comments because of that picture. Now, there was a reporter there, a Jacksonville reporter, and he wrote this long Facebook post, and he shared 7 pictures that he took or others took in that same area at the same time. And there's the long post, but let me just read this part right here. The first image, I think the one we just showed, is from a photographer who appears to be shooting with a professional camera and a telephoto lens. A lens like this, likely in the 200 to 400 millimeter range, I don't know what that means, gives a compressed look. Think football photos in the newspaper. Right? And then he goes through all these different, here's a picture that was taken with a video camera. Here's one taken with my iPhone. Here's one taken by a lifeguard. Here's one's taken with the actual news shot, 7 pictures taken 7 different ways in the same location at the same time. Right? Now here's the part of note. Oh, and one of them was a helicopter picture. Let's just play the helicopter. Let's show the aerial picture. No, it doesn't look like the same beach. Can we go back and forth? Is that possible? Can we go back to the busy beach? Same time. Same moment, same beach. That looks packed. The overhead shot looks empty. Completely different. And you notice there, the aerial shot, everyone's walking, no one's sitting down, no one's sunbathing, no one's playing. They're just walking. So he said the moral of the story is different cameras, different lenses, different angles make the beach look very different. Friendly reminder, I know we've just for years, since Photoshop became a thing, we've been careful with pictures and not getting swayed, not getting tricked. But you're going to see a lot of that here moving forward. So just a friendly reminder to not be swayed. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, I want to go to one of our favorite guests, Rob Henderson. He is a PhD student at Cambridge, got his degree from Yale University, veteran of the Air Force. And Rob, when did you first hit it big? Was it a Wall Street Journal article, or was it Quillette, or what was it?
I mean, it was probably a New York Times article that I wrote back in 2018 that kind of went viral, yeah.
Okay, so it's Times, yeah. So, and you're just crushing it now, and I want everyone to sign up for your newsletter. Where do people sign up for the newsletter?
You can just find it on my Twitter page, at Rob K. Henderson, and it's listed there in the bio.
Everyone go follow him. He's tweeting every day about human nature and just awesome nuggets of wisdom. So I was thinking about you the other day because the theme of this whole season, whatever this is, for me has been grace. Just giving grace to everyone all the time, nonstop, like Rocky montage grace all the time to everyone, politicians, media, as much as possible, because no one knows what's going on. And then we saw Dr. Drew, and he actually admitted he was wrong about something. And I saw people just destroy him. And I was like, oh, that's ridiculous. Like, we all need to constantly, every day, say we were wrong about something. Otherwise, you're either not saying anything interesting or you're deceiving yourselves, and that's not someone I want to listen to. Anyway, that's our background. And you, because you're smart, you know that there's actually a term for this. What is this concept called?
Well, one term that's used often in the psychology research is just moral outrage, moral grandstanding. And essentially, what happens is that, someone does something wrong or commits some kind of perceived infraction, and then you sort of, give rise to this mob mentality online. And oftentimes, people will find targets to unite around, to rally against. And this has become sort of a phenomenon, especially on Twitter and other places on social media. If you're a public figure and you say something, you will often arouse this angry mob at you.
What? Talk about the Dr. Drew example. What stood out to you about him?
Yeah, there was something strange about that one. I mean, Dr. Drew was pretty much saying what a lot of other authority figures and prominent people in the media were saying about the virus, and then over time they sort of updated and changed their minds. And I've seen it here in the UK as well. So, I saw Boris Johnson sort of go one way and then he changed his mind and went another. And this is just something that a lot of leaders and prominent figures have been doing. But, Dr. Drew somehow gave, was targeted and attacked even more than many others. And I think one reason for this is simply because he apologized. Dr. Drew, I've admired him for a long time, and he's just a genuine, sincere guy, and he's very honest. And he apologized for, some of the things that he said before. And, for better or worse, the research shows that oftentimes when prominent figures apologize, they actually get the mob to want them to be punished even more. So there was this fascinating study by this guy, Richard Hanania at Columbia University. And essentially what he did was he presented people with two different versions of the same story. So in one version, he told them a story. It was actually a true story, but he changed some details. So in one story, there was Larry Summers, who was the president of Harvard in the mid-2000s. He made a controversial statement, something about, whether men or women are better at certain kinds of mathematics. And I think he said, evidence suggests maybe men are better at certain kinds of math than women. Controversial statement. He told one group of people, lots of people got mad at Larry Summers, and he apologized for it, what he said. And he told another group of people, Larry Summers said what he said, he stood firm, and he did not apologize. And what he found was that the first group, the group that was told that Larry Summers apologized, demanded that he be punished even more. And so this suggests that if you're a prominent figure in public life and you say something controversial and you apologize, you're actually inviting further wrath from the mob. And, reading this research, and I was thinking about it, this could be, for example, one reason why the president almost never apologized. He may have some understanding of this.
Oh, I'm sure. I don't know if he read the research, but I'm sure one time in his life, he probably did apologize for something and just got crushed for it. And he's like, oh, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to double down in the other direction always. I'm sure he's learned that lesson firsthand. Right. Why? Do you have any idea about why that's the case? Why we act that way? You'd think we would want to give grace to you'd think we'd admire the people who apologize. Why don't we?
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with that. I would want to sort of give people the benefit of the doubt, but I think oftentimes we live in a state of uncertainty about the world, right? And so when you hear someone say something controversial, or when a group hears someone say something controversial, some percentage of that group will, want that person punished. They'll say like, oh, that person did something wrong, let's see them punished. Some other part of that group will sort of say like, oh, it wasn't a big deal. And a lot of people will be in the middle and think like, well, it was kind of wrong, maybe not. They're kind of unsure. But when that person apologizes, that's almost confirming wrongdoing, right? And so that middle group who's unsure, they hear that apology and like, okay, so that person, that person says that they did something wrong. That means they did something wrong. That means they should be punished. And so I think when you apologize, you're sort of swaying people in the direction of, okay, you did something wrong.
Okay, so you're giving people permission to come at you now.
In a way, yeah.
Okay, so what do we do? Because that's not right. That can't be right. I refuse to believe that that's proper. And you should not, right? So what should we be doing?
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think it's right. I think that there are a lot of perverse incentives on social media. It's really creating a very toxic, I think, environment, simply because moral outrage pays off. There's some fascinating research, for example, from William Brady at Yale. He and his collaborators basically went on Twitter and collected this massive data set of like 500,000 tweets. And they basically wanted to see what predicted virality, what predicts retweets. And what they found was that certain kinds of words, like what they called moral emotional words, increase the likelihood of being retweeted. And these are words like attack, bad, blame, destroy, hate. And basically, for each one of those kinds of words that you put in your tweet, you increase the likelihood of it being retweeted by 20%. And so people online may not even be consciously aware of this. They may just sort of, respond to this thinking like, oh, I noticed that when I express anger on the internet, I get more likes. So maybe if I want to get likes, I'll express anger next time. Sure. I think a lot of media companies are learning this too, that, if they write certain kinds of headlines that are very morally charged, they get more clicks, more shares. But as far as what we can do to mitigate this, I was probably to some extent a participant in a lot of this simply because it's easy to get swept up until you start sort of stepping back and reflecting more on it. And one of the most interesting things I read, this analogy that I read, it made me think that there might be a way to sort of make people less likely to engage in this, was from this philosopher called Derek Parfit, recently deceased. But he had this thought experiment called the harmless torturer. And essentially, the thought experiment is like, suppose that I give you a machine with a button on it. And if you press this button, you will send a very tiny electrical shock to an individual, so small they barely even feel it, right? And so if you push this button and they feel this little shock, you didn't really do much. You didn't do much to them. Didn't really hurt them, right? But now imagine that I give 1,000 people these machines, and they all have this machine, and if they press this button, it sends a tiny electric shock to the same one individual. And so if 1,000 people push this button, that's really causing a lot of pain to this one person. And so basically the analogy is to social media, right? If someone does something wrong and I post something like, "Oh, you idiot," or "You're stupid," I insult them. I didn't really do much, right? I just sent them a little insult on Twitter, fine. But if 1,000 people start dogpiling and retweeting the insults at this person and clicking like and sharing and really just 1,000 people trashing them, individually, they're not really doing much, but collectively, they're actually causing this person a lot of anguish. And I think this is kind of what happened with Dr. Drew, right? If one person calls Dr. Drew, dumb or something, fine. But if 1,000 people are piling on relentlessly, that's actually causing a lot of pain, I think. And this is something I think we should all think about the next time we want to insult someone online or like an insult or share it. Sure, you individually are not doing much, but collectively you are part of this person's pain.
Yeah, don't participate. And then on top of that, then you get news outlets writing stories about people being outraged, and then it just piles on top of that and becomes its own thing. It's ridiculous.
Right.
Rob, we got time for one more. I just want to throw it to you. We've talked about a couple different aspects of human nature throughout this entire COVID thing. We've talked about how there's nothing new under the sun. I love that idea. We did a segment the other day about pessimism and why we kind of like wired towards pessimism. We've done a couple things. I just want to throw it to you, and just about 2 minutes. Can you give us some aspect of human nature that you think has really been exposed throughout this COVID time?
Yeah. I mean, I think the COVID time, it's changed quite a bit, I think, as far as people's caution for dangerous things. Essentially, so there's this idea in psychology called the behavioral immune system. And essentially the idea is that when there is a dangerous pathogen or disease in the community, people become much more cautious and much more careful. And I think that this is what's going on a lot. People are becoming perhaps more morally judgmental, for one, as the Dr. Drew case exemplifies. I think a lot of people are spending more time on the internet, and people are also, I think, becoming more conservative in their romantic and sexual lives. People aren't going to want to go out on dates as much with strangers, because there's this sort of ambient concern about catching this virus, I think, that's changing people's willingness to sort of engage in hookup culture, for example. I think there's a lot of this going on, more sort of behavioral conservatism.
Do you think let me ask it there's two ways. What do you think culturally will continue on from this? Good or bad? And then what would you like to see culturally come out of this for the better?
Yeah, as far as predictions go, I mean, I think the safest prediction usually is not much is going to change. In the short term,
okay,
we'll sort of stop shaking hands for a while and stop large crowd gatherings and so on. But if you zoom out and read enough history, you see that basically pandemics create short-term changes. There was the Spanish flu epidemic that everyone compares this one to. For a while, people were more careful. They didn't shake hands as much and so on. And then eventually people started shaking hands again. And I think that's kind of what's going to happen this time. Maybe a year or so of change, and then we'll go back to normal. As far as, what I'd like to see changed, it would be, this is just because of my own sort of more conservative temperament. I would like to see people sort of be more careful in who they get into relationships with, think more about or think twice before, considering whether they should, have a child, for example, or, whether they should get married first. Basically, I hope this will teach people to be more responsible and to sort of appreciate their relationships more that they have currently too.
Yeah, beautiful. Rob, I could talk forever, man. I'm super grateful for your time. And follow Rob on Twitter because there's no like, you're not gonna believe what happened now. Like, there's none of those moral outrage tweets on Rob's Twitter feed, and it's good for your soul. What is it again? And people can sign up for your newsletter?
Yeah. So you can just go to my Twitter at Rob K. Henderson.
All right, beautiful. Every day you get, a couple times a day, you get a nice little nugget of wisdom. We need more wisdom, less outrage. Thanks, Rob. Good to talk to you, brother.
Thank you, Mike.
Appreciate you. More coming up. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. I want to talk about how politicians can really, really screw this up. let me start here. So San Clemente in LA, they filled in a skate park with sand to stop kids from playing there. I think we have video of this. Look how ridiculous this is. Notice how there's no one in sight. And they're filling in this skate park with sand so that no kids use it. That to me is such a wildly pointless overreach. Why would you do that? I think it's absurd. So what did kids do? They started riding dirt bikes. How awesome is that? Look at these kids, they're riding around the skate park on dirt bike. Good for them. I love it. Love it. Now listen, I don't want to say I'm for the shutdown. No one's like for it, but I get it. Okay? I think it's important. I think it's necessary for reasons that we've talked about and we will continue to talk about. But at a certain point, politicians, you got to take what you can get. There is a law of diminishing returns. There was no one on that entire beach in LA on the afternoon that video was taken. No one in sight. So you've cut down beach traffic by 99.99%. Now, you can do whatever you can do to try to keep the skate park shut, but you get a couple kids playing in the skate park, okay, like you did the best you could do, all right? That 0.01% of people is not worth being a spiteful psycho about. I mean, you could put landmines in the skate park too, right? Like, so you know that there's a law of diminishing returns. You know it's not worth putting landmines in the skate park to keep the kids out. So just let it go. Let it go. Draw a different line. Whatever, politicians, whatever line you think we need to draw, take it back half a notch. I think that's probably pretty safe. Take it back half a notch, it'll be okay. I want to talk about a couple reasons here. I think I have 3, but there may be more. Reasons why people will freak out. All right, there's this very like, oh, we're all in this together, and there was this great season of I don't want to say trust, but understanding and patience, and that could go on for longer. But if the government does a couple of these things that we're starting to see more of them, then it's just going to stop right now, and like all that trust, all that goodwill, just gone. Now, as we talked about with Rob a second ago, I'm for grace. I'm giving grace to everyone, every politician throughout this entire thing because it's hard, right? So I'm giving grace whether it's overkill like the governor of Michigan or whether you're way too lax like the mayor of Las Vegas, right? I get every perspective here, and you're not going to get everybody on the same page, and that's fine, and we need to find best practices, and hopefully we can come to some sort of consensus over time. I get it. But there's some things that politicians should learn from and not do. Otherwise, the whole thing falls apart. So we got to learn from history. So the cholera outbreak, there was one in 1831 in Prussia. This is from the Prussian State Gazette in 1831. Groups of people who did not agree with the cholera regulations assembled for the funeral of a carpenter. After refusing to a request to disperse because they were not quarantining, 1831, the dissenters invaded the police building and threw files and papers into the street. The military fired on the crowd and 8 people were killed. Okay, that was 1831. And the newspaper attributed the revolt to a general misunderstanding of the interpretation of the measures against cholera. Right? In other words, people were sick of being stuck inside and the politicians telling them what to do. So the guy died. Doctors said he died from cholera. His family said he died from something else. So they said, we're going to have a funeral. The health officials and the politicians said, no, you can't. And they had this clash, and all this built up bitterness and anger about the quarantining just came to a head. And at that time, people believed that, or over time, I should say, people thought that this was a government conspiracy to keep the government, to prevent people from going about their lives. Again, this is 1831. It sounds like right now. By the way, imagine how much pushback there would be to all this from the right, especially if Hillary Clinton were president. Whew. Imagine if Hillary were president and she were the one issuing these quarantine orders. Man, things would be very different. Things would be very different. Anyway, a little side thing to think about there. There were also there were these riots all across Europe over this cholera outbreak. And it was because of the more heavy-handed the rulers were, the bigger and longer lasting the riots and pushback was. Makes sense. Same thing here. Michigan, for whatever reason, the governor of Michigan has been way over the top. I don't know why her over anyone else, but they're she's banning non-essential items to even be bought. Like she deemed car seats, baby car seats, as non-essential. So you go to the store and you can't buy a car seat? Like what? And the pushback in Michigan has been harder. This is a historian, his name's Samuel Cohn. He said, where elites, this is back in 1831, speaking of this, where elites continued to belittle the supposed superstitions of villagers, minorities, and the poor, violated their burial customs and religious beliefs, and imposed stringent anti-cholera regulations. Even after most of them had been proven to be ineffectual, the riots were higher. So government, you gotta be careful with too heavy of a hand, especially the longer this goes on. And don't do stupid, spiteful things like filling a skate park with sand. It's dumb, right? It's a tricky balance, I get it, all right? Especially now that it's gonna get nice out in San Diego, it's gonna be mid-80s this weekend, people are gonna go to the beach. So if you're the mayor, how do you balance that? Well, some cities are gonna do a good job with it, some are gonna do a really, really bad job with it, and people are gonna respond accordingly, just like they did across Europe in 1831. So first thing, politicians, do what you can, but don't go overboard, and don't arrest moms for pushing their kids on a swing. There's a law of diminishing returns. Second thing, don't be hypocrites, right? Chris Cuomo, CNN host, his brother, of course, is the governor. Chris Cuomo got COVID, his wife tested positive, but after they announced that, he was seen in East Hampton, 30 minutes away from his house, visiting another house of his that's under construction. And some guy saw him do it, and they got in a confrontation. This is what Chris was talking about. He did this radio rant the other day about how much he hates his job, and he mentioned something about a bike, and some guy had a bike. I had no idea what he was talking about. But apparently he was out there at the property. There's some 65-year-old guy who was riding his bike just for some exercise. He looked over, and he said, oh, I think that's Chris Cuomo. Isn't he supposed to be quarantined? Does he have COVID? Like, that's like the whole thing. What's he doing out here? And then his wife came up to him and said, hey, man, what do you want? And the guy said, your brother is the coronavirus czar, and you're not even following his rules. What are you doing? George Stephanopoulos, he was seen out walking around after he got diagnosed with COVID as well. And he has criticized protesters who want to go back to work, right? That's the stuff that gets people really upset. You get heavy-handed politicians and then hypocrisy. That gets people fired up, and rightfully so, understandably so. And politicians need to understand this. All this kumbaya stuff, we're all in this together, that can go away real fast if you're ruled by a bunch of hypocrites. I'll throw a few more in real quick. How much time do I have? All right, we'll do it fast. Another thing, rewriting history will fire people up. You know, Biden doing this whole thing about Trump should have done more. And then obviously everyone knows now that when Trump did stuff, Biden called him racist and xenophobic, okay? Trying to rewrite history. Don't treat us like idiots. Don't try to rewrite the story. Admit you were wrong, just like Rob Henderson was talking about. Admit you were wrong, you're gonna do better now, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I will have way more respect for you. Another thing, don't pretend it's worse than it is. It's bad. I'm on this, I know it's bad. So I'm on that side, right? Some people are like, it's not that bad. That's not me. I know it's bad, but don't pretend that it's worse than it is. So Brooke Baldwin, she wrote this super narcissistic essay about having COVID. And she said, she had this line, it's unbelievable. She said, she gave her the kind of aches, and like really, like here's how bad it is. It's so bad, 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 bad. And it gave you the kind of aches that only 2 extra strength Tylenol could eventually dull. Oh, wow. That's bad. That's a lot of achies. 2 extra strength Tylenol? Whew. You were really, really sick. I mean, not that sick. I mean, you were sick enough, you were well enough to pose for pictures like this. So you got the photographer there taking, and then this picture, you got this nice glamour shot with your dog. How many takes did that take before you get that one just right? But you are so sick. You're like 2 extra strength Tylenol sick. All right, so don't be a narcissist is the point there. And last one, Rachel Maddow. This is a headline on Huffington Post. Rachel Maddow rips Trump, Fox News after drug flunks coronavirus studies about HCQ. Don't root against people getting better because you want to score points against the president, okay? It's a bad look. So take what you can get, politicians. Don't go too heavy-handed. Law of diminishing returns. Don't go after that 0.1%, okay? Makes you look petty. Don't be hypocrites. All right, there you go. Don't be petty. Don't be hypocrites. Don't rewrite history, which is another way of saying, like, admit you're wrong, be humble. All right, so don't be petty. Don't be hypocrites. Be humble. Admit you were wrong when you were. Don't be narcissistic. It's not all about you. And don't root against people getting better to score points for your team. All right? Follow that advice, and maybe we can stay united on this for a little bit longer. Tomorrow, we got our COVID special. Most importantly, I'm looking forward to talk to the virology professor of Columbia University. His intro to virology is available on YouTube for free. It's actually a really good course. It's like entertaining, and so is he. So we're gonna talk with him among other guests coming up tomorrow. True story, Mike Slater. Have a great rest of your day.